In my previous video, I asked you what you wanted me to forge next, and you answered. I'm going to show you step by step how I forged this stake flipper with this one-of-a-kind stag head handle, and I'm going to show you the huge mistake I made while doing it. I've scoured the internet looking for ways to forge stag heads, but all I could find were ram heads, so I guess we're just going to have to figure it out ourselves. We will begin by cutting a piece of 12mm square stock at 450mm, or about 18 inches. Then we'll mark out our lengths for our antlers and our handle twist with a punch, but don't worry, you're not going to be able to see these marks on the finished product. I'm going to mark 50mm from the end of the material, then 140mm, and then 240mm. For the last two measurements, I'm going to mark all the way around the material. We're making these punch marks to help us in the next step, where we will grind some grooves into the handle. Now we'll use an angle grinder with a cut-off disc to make grooves between our markings. We're doing this step now so the stag head doesn't get in the way of the grinder. Don't forget your PPE. I like to go about 2mm deep so the groove has a nice shadow line once it's twisted. To make this twist extra fancy, you want to grind in some cross cuts on the grooves that are spaced further apart. I find the twist looks better if you cut rectangles rather than cubes. Now let's fire up the forge and move on to the part you all came here for. We'll begin by heating up the end of the material and using a chisel to cut down the center of the material to the mark we made earlier. I'm not using a grinder because I want to save as much material as possible. Now we're going to cut out the antler spikes. In hindsight, I wouldn't have done this process now because, as you'll see later on in the video, we're going to run into some pretty big issues because we're going to have to forge the head of the stag, and in doing so using some very heavy hammer blows, and I guess you'll find out what happens. I've slightly sped up the footage to keep this video as short as I can, but if you need to, you can slow it down. After filming the video, I can think of many ways that I could improve the design, but I guess we'll cover those in a different video. This is an experiment after all. Well, I broke one of the antlers off, but that's no problem for me because I can just weld it back on. Just try not to do that. It's cases like this that make a welder very useful in a blacksmith's workshop. If this video has helped you so far, hit that like button. Being a good blacksmith isn't always about how good you can make something the first time, it's how well you can fix it. I can guarantee you back in the 18th century, blacksmiths would have been using their welders to fix up mistakes like this too. Now that the antlers are forged, we're going to move on to the head where I'm going to show you how to do an easy forge weld. In my last video, the comments recommended that I share more detail into my techniques. So from now on, I'll try to elaborate on how and why I use the techniques I do. It's comments like these that help me create better content, so keep them coming. Let's get back into it. To prep for your forge weld, you want to take about 10 mils of your stock and flatten it to about half of the thickness of the original size. Oh, come on! I should have welded that back on after I actually forged the head, so we're going to do that later, but we'll forge the rest of the head now. Now we'll bend the flat section over the far edge of the anvil, wire brush it and fold it over to prepare for the forge weld. For a proper forge weld, it is imperative that you get the workpiece as hot as possible without it burning. Now this is the scariest part because we really don't want to burn the antlers, so what we'll do is we'll make sure that they're facing up in the forge so they don't get quite as hot. You want to pour the flux in while it's hot so it melts into the steel. This step is to get the folds stuck together, but it's not fully welded yet. Now we'll use heavy blows to solidify the weld, then we can do some shaping on the head. Forge welding heads should take about 2 to 3 heats. This thing is really kicking me in the butt, but we will persevere. Mama didn't raise no quitter. To bend the neck, I'm going to heat it up and quench the head so I can hammer without deforming it. I like to start the bend by hammering over the far edge of the anvil, then flipping the workpiece over to finalise the bend. I like to use the horn of my anvil to refine the shape to my liking. We'll finish off by back bending the neck, but don't forget to quench the head again. I broke off that antler on purpose so I could more easily refine the shape of these short horns. Never be afraid to experiment in the forge, just like how you used to in college. Now that the head's forged, we're going to move on to the handle twist that we prepared earlier. For this step, you want to hold your workpiece in a vise at the bottom of the grooves and using a twisting tool at the top of your grooves. Make sure the handle section is headed evenly to get an even twist. If this video has inspired you to get out to the forge, or you want to learn more about blacksmithing, hit that subscribe button. It helps to grow my channel and get my content to more people like you. Now let's flip our workpiece around and start working on the taper. To begin our taper, we want to mark out 150mm from the end of the hook. But John, won't they look ugly on the finished product? Let me show you a trick I just figured out. I'm going to add 10mm to a 150 measurement and punch my small touch mark on all four sides for decoration, so I know the beginning of our taper will be 10mm below. Otherwise you can just measure it out and put a few hammer marks there so you know where to stop. I almost forgot to put my main touch mark in. Now I'll begin forging the end of our taper by holding our material at about a 10° angle off the far face of the anvil, while using our rounding hammer to strike the workpiece at about a 20° angle, turning the material 90 degrees between each blow to keep the taper even and square as we form it. I just realised it's about 9 o'clock at night and I'm probably really pissing off my neighbours, so we're going to carry this on tomorrow. Back to it. This is a fairly long taper, so we're going to draw it out over the horn of the anvil. It's more efficient this way because the rounded face squeezes the material directionally. Doing this along with the rounding hammer will really speed up the process. As the workpiece begins to cool, I like to bring it back to the flat face of the anvil just to straighten everything out before I chuck it back in the forge. Time for another heat. The handle's starting to get a bit hot, so I'm just going to quench this end. Remember to rotate your workpiece 90 degrees between each blow. This isn't absolutely necessary, but it does help if you want to keep your workpiece nice and square as you forge it. You can see where we're stopping 10 mils below our touch mark we put in earlier. It's important to not hold the hammer too tight in your hand, otherwise you'll start cramping pretty bad. I cramped my pants. Now I'm going to flip over to the planishing face, which I'm going to use to knock down any high spots that are made with the rounding face of the hammer. Although I often call it the flat face of the hammer, it's actually been dressed so it's slightly convex. I do this because it greatly reduces the chances of making any marks on the material that you don't want on there. I'm also going to take this time to knock down any sharp edges on the corners. Now we're going to forge the hook by slightly tapping the end of the taper over the far edge of the anvil until it turns around on itself. I wouldn't recommend bending it a full 180 because it'll make it harder to hook your stakes. Now I'm going to rotate the workpiece 90 degrees to the right and form a 90-degree bend over the far edge of the anvil. I'm rotating it to the right because I'm right-handed, but if you're left-handed, you want to rotate it to the left. To add to our design, we're going to add one last twist to our taper, just for some extra visual interest. Oh, I didn't lock my wheels. Because this hook is going to be in and out of meat, I'm going to smoothen it out on my belt sander and use a rounding file to smoothen out the inside of the hook. I'm using my belt sander for convenience, but you can just as easily do this with a hand file. Now I want to reheat the hook to blacken it to prepare the stake flipper for finishing. You don't actually have to get it red hot, but it's no problem if you do. I'm using a food grade paste wax to finish this stake flipper. I just picked this one up from Bunnings back when I made a chopping board. Make sure you get into all the tight crevices to prevent rusting in the future. I had a lot of fun filming this video for you today. Let me know if you prefer the voiceover format that I used. I've never forged a stag head before, and I can guarantee the vast majority of blacksmiths probably haven't either. And I can see why. I can't wait to see what you come up with and see how you can improve on my design. If you've made it this far, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments what you think and how I can improve my content in the future. But until then, thanks for watching, see you next time, and have a good night.